Intellectual stew. Intellectual stew with James Kirklin.
Powerful and provocative. Prophetic and practical.
Intellectual stew.
Informative and inspirational. How you gonna do better if you don't know what better looks like? I do.
Intellectual stew.
Come on, let's talk about it with me, the mind massager.
Intellectual stew with James.
What's up? Time for another episode of Tuesday F.L.O.W. With yours truly, James Kirklin. I got two very special guests tonight. I'm going to go ahead and bring them in, and we will get the conversation started. First of all, we have Stephen Thurston II. How you doing, sir?
Man, I'm doing amazing. How are you?
Man, I'm doing well, Let's go ahead and bring our other guest in. I didn't want to bring you by yourself, so I decided to bring somebody else in with you. And I notice how you guys banter with each other all the time. Let me bring in the Apostle Dr. Kelon Duke. How you doing, sir?
I'm pretty good, man.
Only pretty good?
I'm pretty good. I'm
Okay.
alive, man. Good to see you guys. Thank you for having me on tonight.
As they say, it's good to be
Man,
seen and not viewed. You say what now?
Thank you for bringing my son in the ministry on tonight.
Is that your son? Is that your son in the ministry? Okay, good. We're gonna go ahead and get this conversation started here in a moment, man. I'm gonna let you all introduce yourselves in a minute, but do me a favor, anybody that's listening, even you guys, if you could go ahead and share this thread, and let's try to get some people in this conversation and let them learn something about us. What I do a Monday night show, and in that show, guys, I talk about relationships. You know, and I look at a lot of my mistakes that I made in my 20 years of marriage, and I try to share those things, but also in ministry, you know, because that's all I got is my marriage and my ministry, right? But in one thing that was Dr. Duke that was very profound to me is when Thomas met the disciples after he heard that Jesus had arose, right? He said, "I won't believe unless what? You show me the wounds." And I think we as ministers, if we start to show our wounds a little bit more, not expose ourselves. I'm not saying that, not be just telling on ourselves, but at least every now and just become a little more common. You know what I'm saying? Where become more common with the people. They'll start to believe a little bit more, because I think we kind of put a wedge and a gap between us. So tonight, I wanted to bring on some PKs, some preachers' kids, right? And I put this post out there today, and I talked about. Did you see it? Did y'all see it? I asked them what was their perception of preachers' kids growing up, and we had some colorful answers, and we'll get into some of those tonight. But go ahead, Dr. Thurston, introduce yourself first, and let everybody know who you are.
Sure thing, man. I am Stephen Thurston from Chicago, still living in Chicago, serving currently as the executive pastor of the Salem Baptist Church of Chicago, but the fourth generation preacher and pastor in my family. For 87 years, New Covenant Baptist Church of Chicago has been led by Thurston. So just a little bit about who we are.
4 generations, 87 years, and it's always been a Thurston. 87 years been a Thurston.
Yep, great-grandfather started. My grandfather came behind him. My dad came behind him. I came behind my dad, and then I left. And yeah, we still rocking and rolling over that New Covenant.
Wow, that's amazing. I've had a chance to visit a long time ago with Dr. Craig Oliver came.
Yes.
That was in the early 2000s, but that's why we came over and visited
Yes,
back then. I remember Dr. E.J. Jones was still living then, because I got a chance to preach for him that time on that trip. So that was a good trip for me. Good trip.
Yes.
But go ahead, Dr. Duke, tell us who you are, please, sir. So tell the people who you are. I know who you are.
My name is Kelon Duke, and I was born in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
And my family and I moved from Dallas at the age of 3.
Okay.
And actually, my father got called to the New Jerusalem Church when I was 3 years old. And basically, if you ask me, I'm a Floridian. Okay. I've been in Florida all my life. I'm an identical twin brother. I have an identical twin brother. I have a little sister.
Okay.
And I love sports. I'm a sports fanatic. If you ask me, The Lord interrupted my life by calling me to preach. I thought I was going to the NFL.
Oh wow.
So pray for me. I still got. I have a joke around my house. I still got one more year eligibility left. So
Did you play football at Morehouse?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
So let me explain this. So when we first got to Atlanta, I initially went to Morris Brown.
Okay.
So
Okay.
my first year we went to Morris Brown. My brother and I, we went there on a twin scholarship.
Oh really?
And I ended up trying out for the football team and made it and did pretty well, man. I did really well. So that's kind of a little bit about me. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I remember Doc Thurston, you coming to it because I was serving with Pastor Oliver then. And I remember you and Ralph West and all of you all would come over and visit. I remember that when the twins came up. Twin, I remember when you prayed at the Halloween. Remember they had the Hallelujah night
Yeah.
that night.
I remember.
I remember
Kind
y'all
of like a
praying and
carnival.
yeah, it was a carnival
Yeah.
outside, and you tuned up a little bit for y'all. Let them hear what you was working with. I remember those days, man. And Dr. Oliver used to speak so highly about you guys, man, and
Yeah.
even the relationship he built with bringing your father in and all those things. And I always watched you guys, and I watched how you served and honored your fathers, and I thought that was phenomenal. You know what I'm saying? Because I preached, but I didn't have a spiritual Eli in my life.
Yes, sir.
I think. I know, I know I heard the voice of God at 12 years old. And I remember going to my daddy, who wasn't a deacon or a pastor or anything, and saying, Dad, I heard somebody call me. Who was it? He said, I don't know. I asked my mama. She said, I don't know. I asked my sister. She didn't know. Finally, I talked to my uncle, and my uncle said, next time, do this, because he was a preacher, But that
Yeah.
call didn't come again until 21 years, 9 years later when I was 21 years old. So I wondered how that would have been had I had a spiritual Eli or a pastor. So what was that benefit like? So for instance, Dr. Thurston, how old were you when you received your call in the ministry?
I think it was second semester freshman year at Morehouse,
Okay.
but kind of pushed it off. And it wasn't until maybe sophomore year, and it was actually Jasper Williams. I developed, of course, he and my father, good friendship. And once I got to Atlanta, he welcomed me in as a son. Joe was there, and we became roommates. And we would go over to the checker club because Jasper plays checkers every day, and
He
get
should
his car and ride
Okay.
around campus and all of that. And one day we went to get the car, and he came outside, which wasn't the norm. And he said, listen, I don't know what y'all doing, but both of y'all are supposed to be preaching. And y'all let me know when you're ready.
Wow.
And Joe and I had been having private conversations. And so we're like, hey, man, did you tell your dad? Like, no, man, he on some spiritual stuff.
Wow.
And so he kept pressing it a little bit, and other people started mentioning it out the blue. And so after maybe about 6 or 7 months, we finally called Jasper and said, hey, we need to talk to you about something. And we got to the check club, and he said, I know what you came to talk about. You ain't got to tell me. Joe,
Wow.
you're going to preach your sermon, your first sermon watch night. Steve, I'm going to call your dad, and we're going to set yours up for spring break. And that's how it happened.
Wow. So you were 19 in that range?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Dr. Duke?
I was 17.
Okay.
I was in the 11th grade. And again, I was playing football, man. What happened was I really sensed a call, man, even prior to that.
Okay.
I didn't want to preach, man, to be honest with you. I grew up in a city that, really, it was a football kind of sports city. That's what the girls like. And I church, this is not, when you think of Miami, Florida, you don't think of like a church town.
Oh, I can
A
imagine
church
that.
city. So it wasn't nothing cool about a 17-year-old boy like, hey, y'all, God called me to preach. And so I ran, man. And what happened was I was playing ball and things were going well. I broke my shoulder.
Wow.
And I knew in that moment, it was like the Lord was like, dude, I don't care what you do. You're not going to be effective until you answer the call. And I never forget it. We were in revival. Dr. Freddie Haynes was preaching for us.
Okay.
And something about that message really, really hit me. And I told my father that night, I said, Dad, I have something to talk to you about. And he knew what it was. And so we were riding down 95, and I told him, I said, Dad, I'm ready to accept my call to preach.
Wow.
And my father literally pulled to the side and started crying. And he
Wow.
said, I knew the day you were born that the Lord called you to preach.
Jesus.
And so I was just waiting on you, man. So that's a bit of my call story.
Okay, so let's segue into that first question that I sent you all. So you were 17 when you got your call. Steve, you were 18, 19 in that range. So tell me, growing up in the home with very busy pastors. I mean, you just said your father went to New Jerusalem. I think you said when you were 3 or somewhere around that range.
Yeah.
And so you were a lifer, Steve. I mean, you grew up and you were in Pampers and all that. So what was that relationship? If you weren't, were they cultivating you for eventually going into ministry? Were they subliminally trying to train you or teach you? What were the dynamics of that relationship? Start with you, Steve, first.
Yeah, none of that. My dad and I have never talked about preaching.
Oh, wow.
Never. Yeah, he never pushed, prodded. You would get that from members at the church. Oh, you're going to be like your dad and all of that. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. I never had an interest in it either. And so to this day, he's never put pressure on me to do anything. Whatever I wanted to do, he has fully supported. I could call him today and say, hey, man, I want to join Elon Musk and go to the moon. And he'd be like, how much I got to cut the check for?
Wow.
He really has never put any pressure on me to move to the ministry space. I was a musician. I was born with the unique ability to kind of play any instrument by ear.
Okay,
I settled in on drums. And so I thought that my lane and role would just be in the music space in church.
Okay. And so you play, so you were a church musician.
Yep.
The whole time growing up. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I learned that much about you. I didn't know.
Yeah,
that
even
you were
in
a
college,
musician.
I played at 3 different churches there in Atlanta.
Really? So when you were coming up, that was your job, just play drums for the church and whatever else you were interested in school or whatever else. Dad just supported that, and that was it, huh? Really?
Yeah,
And
I was an entrepreneur and
Okay.
all of that. So got into some business activities around 16 or so. So fully supportive of all of that. And that was really my path. I knew my dad was going to pay for school as it relates to college cash. And I asked him, give me the cash, let me flip it. I got a couple of businesses I want to buy. And he said no. And I ended up settling for Morehouse. But yeah, entrepreneurship and then doing the music thing for church. That was going to be it. That was going to be all.
Man, that's got to be interesting because Kelon, I can remember growing up in my house. Now I told you I didn't have no preachers. I had family. Now we did church, but we had 2 requirements. It was either BTU and Sunday morning service or Sunday morning service and Sunday school. But I had to be at both of those every week, and if I missed them, wasn't no going outside, wasn't no playing, none of that kind of stuff. But I had to get that training. Was that the same kind of similar upbringing for you, Kelon, or what were the dynamics of your home?
Yeah. So my father did not, he wasn't like trying to push the whole preacher thing on me. I think one of the things I appreciate about my father, man, he allowed us to be, human beings and kids, outside of the context of the church. I think, like Steve, you grow up, your dad's a pastor and, the church is like, oh, you're going to preach one day. I'm going to be honest. My twin, Kenneth, he was probably the one that they picked to be the preacher. I to be honest with you, bro, I kind of really wasn't feeling church at it. I what millennials are doing now, I was doing as a kid. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't care anything about it. I'll be there like, okay, when can we leave?
Okay.
And so you had some folk, but it wasn't a whole lot. It was clear that I wanted to do something else.
Okay.
And my father allowed that, man, even though he, as he stated, knew that, I would eventually answer the call. He allowed me to be me. And I appreciate that, man. It was, of course, we went to church. I was in the youth choir. I, served on the usher board, but that was about it. Other than that, he didn't force a whole lot of that on us. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So you wasn't a Phineas and Hophni though type situation, though, were you?
No.
You wasn't that bad.
I wasn't that bad.
You wasn't Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I wasn't that bad, man. I was different, man. You have multiple kids. I don't know. I always wanted to find my own lane. That was always important to me. And I mean, coming up in an environment like I just like my father,
Okay.
from a
You
kid,
do.
and I have an identical twin brother.
Hmm.
And I've always wanted to be myself. You grow up like, oh, you look just like your daddy. Oh, you got an identical twin brother. So I always wanted to kind of find who I was. And
Mm.
sometimes I think I went to the extreme. I mean, I won't say like I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't out like stealing. I wasn't out. But it was clear that I was attempting to find my own identity,
Mm.
and that identity was something other than the church. I told my father, kind of growing up, man, when I leave this house, I don't know if I'm going to church anymore. I mean, I was that kind of
Wow.
kid. So yeah, man. So football was something I engaged in a lot. That really gave me my own identity, and I was good at it.
Okay.
Coming out, man, in high school, I was a top recruit. Coming out, I actually chose Morris Brown because I knew that at that time I accepted my call to the ministry, and a lot of the schools that wanted me did not have strong religion departments.
Gotcha.
And so I knew going to Morris Brown, I said, well, I'll walk on. I know I'm good enough. I'll make the team. They'll give me a scholarship. And basically that plan worked out.
Mm.
And so, yeah, man. So, I mean, I hope I answered your question.
No, very much. I mean, that's what I want. That's what I'm saying. Be as raw as you possibly can. I mean, that's
Yeah.
because I want them to hear us. I mean, like I told somebody that I want to have an analytical conversation with not trying to sound like we're trying to analyze. It
Yeah.
is. It is what it is. And some people don't know these things, and these are things. So your situation, Stephen, is different because you're engaged because you're on the drums. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Or were you a Phineas and Hophni type? And those that don't know, Eli had two bad sons. And those bad sons, they messed up all in the temple, right? I mean, they messed with the temple girls. They stole the best choices meat that people would bring to sacrifice. I mean, they were a mess. And there was, if I'm talking too loud, I'm sorry. Let me try to calm down. There are those that used to believe that the PKs were awful children. I mean, if you looked at some of the responses that I had on my page today, some of them
Yeah.
said they were the spoiled kids, they were the bad kids. But ironically, Steve, there were a lot of PKs that were speaking up,
Yes,
and
sir.
they said that a lot of times they would get in trouble. Other kids in the church would make them get in trouble. They would lead them to do the wrong thing, or they would influence them to do the wrong thing. I don't know. Maybe they would dare y'all or whatever. I don't know what happened, but whatever it was. But what was your upbringing similar, Steve, as far as finding your identity, or did music help with that?
No, so yeah, I created my own lane. I knew like it's almost like I've been here before. I knew
Okay.
because me and my dad had the same name, I needed to do stuff different, and I
Okay.
always wanted to create my own space. My dad is not musical. My uncle is,
Okay.
and other members of the family have done well in the music industry, and so I figured I'd do this and do entrepreneurship. And I didn't have a lot of the expectations placed on me as the pastor's son that I
That's good.
hear from a lot of other PKs. And I think
Okay.
that some of the derogatory framework that's been put upon PKs is really a result of people having unrealistic expectations
That's
on
good.
children based upon the career path that their parent or parents have been called to. But
Yeah.
New Covenant was a good space that didn't create that. And I was just kind of allowed to be me and be free and explore and try different stuff and just be different. I've been different from the beginning. I'm still different now. And they gave me the free range to just be my different self. And again, people would say stuff about me preaching, but there was never any force or pressure. I never came home crying, they trying to make me preach. None of that. And my dad would have, I believe he would have shut it down if that had been
Wow.
elevated in that space.
That's good. Can y'all still hear me?
Yeah, loud and
Okay,
clear.
because I see I'm frozen a little bit on my screen, but as long as y'all can hear me, that's all that matters to me. So that's good, man. Because and I think I really like the fact that you all were a little older, not 12, 13-year-old preachers. You know, you see these cats walking around, these little boys walking around the convention with tails down to their back of their shoes, you know, trying to look like an old preacher, you know,
Right.
and it's embarrassing.
Yes.
Hold on, man. Hold on. I'm going to stop this camera for a hot second. I got to get myself back in. Hold on 1 second. Hold on. Let me get myself. I'm for real, though, but I've seen it. I promise I have. Let me see if I'm back. Am I good? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not. But still, I don't care if y'all can't see me. Y'all can hear me. But it was so crazy that I see these little boys, man,
Yes,
because
sir.
they want to be, they don't have an identity, right?
Correct.
So they try to find their identity in someone else. You know, they want to hoop like somebody else, or they want to, you know, argue and text like somebody else, or, you know, and then they buying sermons online and all these other things. Dwayne Frazier said he likes your hat. He said that hat though. He said, hey there. But I really admire Pastor Duke and Pastor Thurston for giving you guys the space to really develop your own identities and become the best version of yourself. So what did it look like once you left out of your parents' house now and you're going to Morehouse, starting with you, Kelon? Because now, because you're preaching now though, right?
Right. I'm preaching now.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So what did that transition look like, leaving home and coming to Atlanta and all that?
Well, from which perspective?
Okay, as far as, you know, now you don't have covering, and you just started preaching a year ago, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And so you're a newbie at this preaching thing to an extent. You're only a year out, and now it probably would have looked a lot different at 15 because Dad got you in the house for 3 years before he sends you out to college, right? But now he only has you for a year, and you're going to be gone for 4 years. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure it's some things that he could share with you now as a preacher that he wouldn't just share with you as a son. So what was your process looking like? I remember, like I said, I remember you and your brother coming to Elizabeth, and I remember Pastor Oliver putting his hands on you all.
Yeah,
you know, but what helped you in your matriculation through ministry to get to where you are now, especially starting in that 18, 19, 20-year-old age?
Yeah, so we got to Atlanta. Let me kind of share with you what helped us get to Atlanta, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So my father initially, we were thinking about going to Florida A&M. We got accepted into Florida A&M, and we had, you know, a lot of stuff. I mean, you know, we're from Miami. So my godmother, she was an alum at FAM. And so all of our life, y'all going to FAM. And so we ended up meeting a guy by the name of Pastor E. Dewey Smith. And he came and preached, and we were sitting down, we were chatting with him, and he, you know, obviously, you know, told us that he went to Morehouse. And we was like, man, we really want to get to Atlanta. And, you know, this was a kind of a challenge for my dad because he was kind of focused on FAM. But my dad also wanted us to meet some new friends, you know, find a new space where we can grow, you know. And so FAMU, basically, you know, a lot of our friends were going there. And so my dad was like, dude, okay, I'll let y'all go. And E. Dewey was, you know, kind of the guy who really helped that along, him and Dr. Kirklin at night.
Okay.
You know, so Dewey was like, man, listen, let the boys come up, man. We got them. Kirklin at night was like, I'll be their spiritual mother. And so, you know, that of course was a great help. So we got to Atlanta, and, you know, we met friends. We met Steve. I don't know if, you know, people, I think, you know, social media think we just met each other, but we actually were roommates during that experience. So, you know, we got a chance to connect. And so it was him. It was also Ralph West II.
Mm-hmm.
We all came together, man. And to be honest with you, I know, like, Ralph was still wrestling with his call. He eventually accepted his call, I think his sophomore year, or our sophomore year. And so, man, just being in that AUC climate, it really shaped us, you know. And then just coming to Atlanta at that time, when you talk about church and just, you know, the city period. I mean, you talk about hip hop, pop culture, you know, Atlanta was the place to be. People were moving there left and right. It was mega churches on every corner.
It was popping.
It was popping, man. So
Yeah.
that a lot of that shaped us. Pastor Jasper Williams shaped us. He gave us a lot of opportunities to preach. Pastor Craig Oliver. Atlanta really embraced my brother and I when we got there. We were preaching for everybody. Matter of fact, prior to going to college, man, God really, really blessed us. We were preaching for some of everybody. And so when we got there, you know, obviously there was a lot of shaping. And I'm gonna tell you, the shaping happened through great criticism. We got to Atlanta, and you know, I think we were gifted. We had somewhat of a gift, but the gift was hooping and singing. Had somewhat of a message, but there were guys there who challenged us, like, dude, that's not enough. You know, you need to grow. Like, you know, people like Steve, yo, you need to work on your message, man. And so that environment, it was a lot of, you know, it was very critical. You know,
Yes,
cats
sir.
today, you know, you tell them they missed it and their feelings are hurt. Well, that was our culture at Morehouse. Morehouse and the AUC was an environment where you went to school with the brightest and some of the best. And so, man, that environment really shaped us. I could kind of talk all day about that, but jumping into all of these different people, Walter Scott Thomas Jr., and these were some of the people, Stephen Thurston, he's a blessed memory to us now, Quentin Barlow.
Barlow. Yeah.
I mean, we can name Joe Flippin, Ricky Flippin. You name so many names, man. We were all there together, and that helped shape us. That community of preachers helped shape us.
I think he dropped off, Duke, but yeah, you made a good point. That collective community, and then we had ITC right around the corner. So you had the older guys, Marcus Cosby, James Bumpus, all of those guys. Danny Thomas would critique us and all of that. So we had that whole collective community of different tiers and different levels of preachers to kind of shape us and guide us and walk us along that experience and to help us, to challenge us to be better.
Right.
Not just rely on our dad's name, and then whatever limited gift that we had, but to keep pushing us to the place where we needed to be, man.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great experience. I'm glad, you know, that my father and, you know, and others who helped us, you know, kind of get out of our comfort zone. That was the thing that really got me, man. Because, you know, Miami was a good space for us. But, you know, growing up in a city where your dad is, you know, who our fathers were and still are, it allowed us to get out of that comfort zone and meet new people, get new exposures, and build new relationships. And I am thankful for that.
Yes, sir.
Atlanta really shaped us. I know it shaped me. Because I saw some stuff. I don't know if you remember a suit, you know, I mean, just something like dress. I mean, coming from my, you know, where I came from, you know, wearing a lot of buttons on your suit was a big thing. And I don't know if you remember this, Steve. Remember I had that the cutoff suit?
Yes.
The what you call it, Cedric Entertainer?
Yes,
and,
I recall that.
And yeah, Doc. So I had the Cedric the Entertainer. Had my it was literally polyester material. I wore it, and I think we were together, if I'm not mistaken. Or I know Dewey was around. That's how I wore it around Pastor Smith. And I said, man, what you think, man? What you think? He told me, he said, who made that for you? So I told him who made it. And I said, well, what you think, man? He said, man, don't ever wear that suit around me again. Oh my God, man. Your dad was right there too. He was just like, yeah, we got to get you a better suit. Yeah, man, that suit was all the way down, and it was kind of flooding a little bit.
It
So
was
it was stuff like that, man, that we take for granted. But it was a blessing, man. I mean,
yeah,
all of that shape, all of that shape, those conversations.
Right.
I don't think, and this is true, and I think Brother
You
James
had
is
it
back
right.
on.
You had it
You
right.
back on?
Man, hey, y'all charge to my head, not to my heart. But I heard
Oh,
everything y'all. I promise I heard everything y'all said though, and
oh
you
yeah,
y'all are actually getting a conversation where I wanted it to go.
yeah,
You had me right at first, and you moved me, put me back over this way.
yeah.
So
But I
this
was
other way.
telling him, James,
Uh-huh.
when we were in Atlanta, man, and I'm certain he could attest to the fact, man, the preachers that we were around, I don't care how good of a job you thought you did, you never did well.
Oh,
Like, nope, you always flunk, right?
every time, especially around
So,
Craig Olivers of the world.
he didn't do well. Oh man, he ain't saying nothing. So, that environment, though, it helped us, and
Yeah.
that's what I was sharing with him. So I won't take up all the time. Go
No,
ahead,
no,
Steve.
no, 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 no. Man, we got an hour-long conversation, and Stephen, would you want to add anything to what he just said?
yeah. That space. It was so our dads went to Bishop College, and I
Okay.
think if Bishop College had still been in existence, all of us would have been in that space.
Mhm.
And so I think in that AUC environment, it provided us something similar to what our dads probably experienced in that bishop space, and just helped
Okay.
us, honed us, and developed us in ways that we would not have gotten if we'd stayed at home. And what I'm glad about, like especially with Duke and Rao, we got away from our dads. And it's
Okay.
funny to see other preachers that try to imitate and mimic our dads, and we
Wow.
they son, and we ain't trying to do that.
Wow.
And being away was critical to help us to develop our own voice,
Yeah.
because we recognize that if we tried to imitate our dad or ride off our dad's coattails, when our dad dies, so do our ministries.
Right.
And so the fact that we were able to develop our own voice and push each other. No, man, you sound too much like them. Take a step back. You
Yeah.
need to shift this.
Yeah.
That helped us to get to the spaces and the places where we currently find ourselves.
That's good stuff, man. That's real good stuff. Because that was a question I was going to ask. Was how you answered it. You answered it. So, Steve, let me ask you this right here. When you were assisting with your father, knowing and your father,
Mhm.
because it's a difference as an assistant like me who is not my father. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you kind of walk on the eggshells a little bit more. You want to make sure you present things properly. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? 'Cause I'm
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you something, I'm the wrong one to embarrass. You know what I'm saying? So I can't. It's certain things I just can't. I ain't been delivered from cussing yet. I'm still working on that one. So y'all got to pray for me. And I cuss in the wrong places sometimes, so I got to be a little careful with that whole cussing thing. I was raised with a daddy, and my daddy was my daddy. So that to have a daddy have a daddy first and then have a spiritual father. Because I had a
Yes.
strong daddy. You know what I'm saying? My daddy was my dude. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
To this day, that's my dude. So then also to have another spiritual father that I would succumb to. You know what I'm saying? I have to, kind of have
Submit
as a
to.
covering. Yeah. Submit. That's the word. Submit to. But that's your father. And so with your eye, because I watch a lot of things you do. Pastor Storrs told me to connect with you a long time ago. Clarence Storrs, he kept saying you need to connect with
Yes.
Thurston.
Good guy.
But your creativity, how did your creativity in the marketplace, your education, how you handle these Black Hebrew Israelites, all these things you do, how did those things add to your father's ministry and to the church?
Yeah, great question. So let me give clarity. So I think what put me in a different position than some other guys, New Covenant called me as pastor. I wasn't just there as the pastor's son on staff helping out. I was in Atlanta in church with Duke one day at Dewey's church, and I started getting text messages and calls and all of that congratulatory. And after service, I went to the office and I called my mom and I asked her what was happening. I was getting all these congratulatory messages. And she said, "You don't know?" And I said, "No, what?" She said, "There was a vote last night and members voted you in as pastor." I had no idea that was taking place. And
Wow.
so I asked her, "What was the percentage of the vote?" She said 97%. And so she said, "You haven't talked to your dad?" I said, "No." And so I waited until after he got done with the second service and called him, and we had a conversation about it. And that transitioned me back. And so I started flying back and forth from school every other weekend, preaching, running all 3 services, all of that type of thing.
Really?
And I was the co-pastor. My father and I had equal power. The only thing is, if I spent over $10,000, I needed to get his okay, let him know what I was doing.
Okay.
So I had some freedom and some reign because my dad was on the road so much.
Okay.
And at that time, my dad had become the president of the National Baptist Convention of America. So growing up, my dad's travel schedule may have had him, when I was a little kid, on the road 25, 30 weeks out of the year.
Wow.
During his term as president, it increased from there. During the 9 years I served as pastor of New Covenant, my dad got to the point of being gone 50 weeks out of the year.
Wow. So what did he do? What did he do to compensate for that time, though? Do you have siblings?
I'm the oldest of 4, 2 sisters, and then the brother that brings up the rear.
Okay, so he's gone 50 weeks a year. What does he do? Because I'm listening to your relationship. I'm looking in your eyes. I mean, y'all had a good relationship. Because you watch a lot of people resent the heck out of their fathers, you know what I mean, for not being there and all this kind of stuff. I don't understand that, because my dad was so good to me. But
Gotcha.
what did he do to compensate for that, or did he have to?
He didn't have to. He took care of business. My siblings, my mom, we never wanted for anything. We went through school. My dad paid cash, came out with no bills. If we wanted to buy a house, he was there. Car, whatever we needed, he was a consummate and continues to be a consummate provider. And so he's always made sure that we had whatever we want, as much school as we wanted. Nope, you go and you don't worry about it. I offered to pay for school when I went to Morehouse. He said, no, that's not your job. That's not your responsibility. It's mine.
Wow.
I'm cutting the check.
Wow.
So he made sure all was good. And I knew that's what my dad did for a living. Just like an entertainer or an athlete's kid knows, my dad's on the road. My dad's at the stadium. My dad's stadium was the church. And so I never had an issue or problem with my dad working and making sure that we were good. My only concern was, because I didn't understand life insurance and all that stuff as a kid, what happened is dad's plane crashes. How do we keep going? How do we maintain this lifestyle? All of that type of thing. But all of those experiences and being an entrepreneur and all of that, when I brought it back to the church, I don't think my dad expected the people to kind of like take to me as quickly as they did. But I'm there with them all week long, every week. My dad would fly in on first and third Sundays. Those are his Sundays. I had second and fourth, and then we would kind of rotate on the fifth Sunday. But I was kind of running the day-to-day operations. It was at a time in Chicago. Jenkins had recently become pastor of fellowship. Otis had taken over there at Trinity from Jeremiah Wright. And so my dad and I had something kind of sweet. We were able to blend and mix the old school and the young progressive stuff. So we could get everybody. So some of the people that for whatever reason didn't like Jenkins or the direction he was taking the ship in, they could come to New Covenant because they knew my dad. My dad preached a lot of fellowship, and Pastor Evans was his father after his biological father died. So got that. People that may not have liked Otis, whatever. And I'm good with all these guys, so I'm not slamming anybody. For people who want to be messy and petty that may watch this. And so we were able to kind of pull in a different demographic, and I was able to do some cool stuff and run free. And then, of course, my dad and I would meet sometimes because of the travel schedule. And this was before 9/11 and all this stuff with the airports. Sometimes I would fly. Let's say my dad had a connecting flight in Atlanta. I would fly from Chicago to Atlanta, meet him in the terminal, go over what we needed to go over. He would then jump on his flight connecting wherever he was going. I'd fly back to Chicago. Sometimes we would meet like that. It was that kind of crazy and hectic. So we were also in the capital campaign to build our new campus. So I was kind of like making sure that the money was coming in week after week, doing all of that type of thing. So I think the fact, again, that I was voted in as pastor, and then the fact that my dad was gone so much gave me the room to kind of spread my wings. And he trusted me enough to kind of carry the load there at the church. And I learned as I went. And then I had great people like Pastor James Meeks, who stepped in to serve as mentor. And I had Jasper Williams and Jasper III. So I had some cool guys that I could do it at the time that I could lean on for insight and inspiration. And Jenkins was doing a lot of stuff at fellowship that I wanted to do. So stuff I couldn't do because my dad be like, nah, we're not doing it. Jenkins could do it. So I could celebrate him. Like, okay, Dad, look, Jenkins did it. I told you about that 3 months ago. It's working for him. And so we were in a good space.
So he kept the right to say no.
He kept the right to say no.
Okay.
And oftentimes his way of saying no, he would agree to stuff. One of the things I will never forget, it was watch night. Watch night is coming up. And Dewey Smith back in Macon days,
Okay. I
he
remember
would
that.
like be the show. I mean, still, even when it got to GTR, but when we was in Macon, it was on another level, turning away thousands of people. So I'm coming from that experience. I'm like, Dad, we need to be popping like that here in Chicago on Watch Night. We need to be turning away people. So I came up with a grand scheme and plan, met with the staff, laid everything out, ran it by him 2-3 times. Cool, let's move, let's do it. The night of the service, I'm in my office and my dad comes out maybe 20 minutes before service starts, because I didn't hype it up. People are coming in early, and he gets up on the mic and starts singing hymns. And like,
Wow.
y'all put away all that stuff y'all gonna do, and totally killed what he'd agreed to and planned. So yet he still had veto power.
Wow.
That didn't happen often, but he will pull it from time to time.
He
When
saw
he
that
couldn't
crowd.
see
He
it.
said, "It's my turn." It says, "My time tonight, huh?" I saw that
Yeah.
crowd. I've seen
Yeah,
that
so we
happen.
would have those things, but it was all good. It didn't
Gotcha.
create strife and all of that.
Gotcha. Similar question for you, Dr. Duke. Growing up in growing up the same type of way, and bringing in your creativity, what you learned, because like you said, you start preaching at 17, you go off to school, so everything you're bringing back. Uh, how did that look? How did that look? What did those years look like after college, and how did they end up seeding into what you're doing there at the church now?
So I once I finished Morehouse, I ended up going to Howard.
Okay.
So I was in the DMV area, and I was privileged to work with two guys. Um, One, Pastor Lee Earl, who's a blessed memory to us now. He pastored the Shiloh Church in what's that, Alexandria, Virginia.
Okay.
And then I ended up working for a Morehouse brother, Pastor Delman Coates at the Mount Enon Church. And both of those churches kind of shaped me, and in a way that I think has really, I mean, my leadership style, the whole team aspect of ministry, it came from both of those guys.
Okay.
I think one of the things that I do well is build teams.
Okay.
So I ended up pastoring in Chicago. I pastored in Chicago for 7 years, the Calvary Baptist Church in right outside of Chicago, Glenwood, Illinois.
Okay.
And I consider that to be a very successful. It was a successful church, and my pastorate there, we did a lot of great things. The church grew in every aspect, spiritually, financially, numerically, you name it. We were really, really becoming one of the leading churches in the South suburbs. And so I received this call, I believe, from God. God started messing with me, man. It's time to go back home. It's time to go back home. And my father and I began to speak about it and both prayed about it. And now currently we're in a succession process. And basically all of my experiences, man, it's so much. One of the things that I learned in pastoring, I realized this, Steve. I didn't think about this. I pastored in some of the and even lived, pastored, and went to school in the blackest cities, in these United States of America, Atlanta,
And
the DMV, and then Chicago.
yeah.
And to bring back, both of those places represented Black excellence. And coming to a city like Miami, where great city, our people are doing well, but there's so much more progress that needs to be made. I think has shaped, man, my experience, at our church now. Currently, man, the what I bring at this church is vision, fresh vision. And I believe that the vision that we have is unlike anything we've seen in the South Florida area. I get a chance to bring all of those experiences into this context.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so team building is something that I think we do well. One of the things that I'm trying to teach our church is that it doesn't have to be just on one man. My father, the blessing of his leadership is he's like LeBron James. He did it all.
Okay.
Preached, administration, I mean, you name it. I mean, the dude can he can sing, he could, get up there and work the cameras. I mean, you name it. I mean, this
I love
guy
it.
does everything. That's not who I am. I'm a team builder. I don't believe that all of the vision and all of the ideas have to come from me.
Okay.
And so now we're getting ready to start a new campus on the north side of town, and we put together a launch team.
Wow.
And we also started a planning committee team, which is something I know this may sound like real elementary, but it's working for us, man. I'm telling you, to see these teams and groups come together, it's what I learned when I was working for Lee Earl, Mount Enon. So we bring that. I think that we also bring, structure as it relates to ministry in some areas in our context. So there's so much. I mean, pastoring for 7 years, you learn so much, and so that experience, man, is helping us greatly. I
Good
felt
stuff.
like my first church really developed me as a preacher.
Wow. That's good stuff.
And I don't sound like my father. And there is a different sound, and that to me is I think that the people say, well, he sounds like his father as relates to, because I look like him, my voice sounds like him, but my approach to preaching and my approach to ministry is just different.
Yeah.
It's
Right?
more like
I mean,
me. He,
say it
he's
again.
he's
Oh
taking on
boy.
my persona when he's down there
Oh
in
boy.
Florida.
So,
Oh, you did
man,
say that. You did say that was your son, right?
It
right,
is.
right. So preaching, man, ministry. I mean, I can get into details that'll keep us here all night. But there's so many different areas, man. I like Pastor Steve said, one of the things, man, I never wanted to do. I always wanted my own identity, just like him.
Mhm.
And leaving home, man, really gave us exposure.
That's good, man.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm learning is my exposures are not my dad's. Like one of
Yes.
the things that I realized working in ministry with my father is that my father has never worked on anybody's staff.
Wow.
And so I realized this other day, Steve, most of my ministry, even though I pastored for 7 years, I've been on somebody's staff.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And so I kind of see things from the staff position
Yes,
That's
sir.
good.
in a way probably that my dad doesn't see it.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I like
Does that
that.
make sense?
That makes
Makes
a lot of
sense.
sense.
So the way that I operate with staff and empower them, because when you bring somebody on staff, and we have, matter of fact, one of the largest staffs, in the South Florida area. But when you
Mhm.
bring somebody on staff, what releases them to be their best selves is when you can trust them to do the assignment.
That's good.
Now, my
That's good.
father, he does it for him, like, well, no, I'm gonna release you. What do you think? A minister of music. I'm not gonna tell me, let's sit down at the table. What are you reading? What are you studying? Empower me, because I want you to feel like this is your ministry. I want you to feel like you have some say. So all of that works, and we're seeing that, I think, benefit our ministry in a
That's
way,
good,
because
man.
I think people are really standing up in our context, feeling like, wow, man, my ideas do matter. So
Yeah.
anyway, I can go on
But
and on and on.
two things about what you just said, and I want to highlight these things. Stephen, you let me know if you agree with me or not on this. Okay. First
Okay.
of all, I've always heard that the test of true power is when you're willing to give that power away.
Yeah.
That's true power. Okay.
Yeah.
So I love that aspect of it. But number two, I love the fact that you said you went out and served, you learned these things, but when you came back, you implemented, but you didn't implement based on fixing a flaw that you thought you saw. Because so many times we see something and we think we can do it better, right? or we think because our fathers did it this long, and so I can fix that fast. That's one of my father's flaws, and I want to build on the foundation and use his flaw as a foundation. You didn't do that. You went out and you saw it work in other places, and you just said, "Let me implement this." Not
Yeah.
because this isn't working, because that did work. It worked, and it served its
Right.
purpose. Am
Right.
I saying that right?
Oh yeah, it worked. It worked, and it's
Okay.
working
Just-
still.
and was working and is working, but sometimes you can add an amendment to something. You know what I'm saying? That's just like a car. You can put 89 in it and it'll do okay, but if you put 93 in it, you're gonna get a little bit better gas mileage. It's probably gonna burn a little smoother. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? The car's gonna last a little bit longer, all those things. But it wasn't like it wasn't gas or fuel in the car. And same thing with both of you guys' ministries. It wasn't like it wasn't fuel in the ministry. You know what I mean? Y'all have always had fuel. But if you can come and put a little octane boost in it, I think that might be the word. But
I like that.
And that's not to denounce anything that Dad did. That's just to enhance. It adds to it. It furthers his legacy, and I really appreciate that about both of you. Even when you emailed me today and told me, hey, I want you to understand this is the context, and you said, now we're good, but this is where I am. And I'm like, oh, my bad. I thought you were EP for your father. So I messed that up.
Gotcha.
But your experiences prepared you to go to Salem. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. Wait, you froze up. Say that one more time.
I said your experiences prepared you to go to Salem.
Oh, for sure. Everything, every step, every stage prepared me for the next. And then the lesson I learned there prepared me for the next. I mean, I've done so much stuff from consulting with Chicago Public Schools to Chicago Urban League, serving as National Youth Director for Rainbow Push. All of those elements kind of set me up for where I am and helped me to win at each level, because I get to a space, I got to say, like, oh, I've seen this before. I read this story before.
That's
all
good,
of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's good. That's good, man. So let's transition for these last 7 or 8 minutes, because I'm not gonna hold y'all on too long. But we've talked about EP a lot, and we've talked about what helped you get to EP. But let's go back to PK a little bit. What was it like growing up in the church? Were unfair expectations? Either one of y'all can answer it first. Were there unfair expectations placed upon you? Did it ever make you develop any resentment? I'm not. I would make you say, I'm not going to try to live up to this type of thing. I mean, what was it like growing up in the church, not the house, but in the church?
I didn't have any of those bad feelings. It only made me want to get my own stuff, because I would hear people say, oh, your daddy did that for you. Your daddy gave you that. And I just want to get to a place where I could say, hell no, this is mine. And so that probably drove my entrepreneurship and my hustle, so I can get my own stuff and be able to say, no. He opened doors and all that kind of thing, but I did the work. Absolutely. And I think that's a misnomer that people have. I don't mean to shift from your question, but they think that just because you're the son of, you get certain things, or the world is open to you. No, a lot of people will put up stumbling blocks because they think it's too easy for you. And so I've had job interviews where the whole conversation was about who my father was and what my father has done, rather than what my resume says and all that. And it's been a hindrance. It blocks. And I think Kelon can attest to this. Even if we both tried to go out and get a church today, the number one thing that will probably stop a church, no matter how gifted, how great our resumes are, they're going to wonder, you're your daddy's son. Are you going to leave us and go back? And people don't see that other side to being the son of, and how it can have some negative connotations. So my church space, again, it was cool, didn't have those issues, but it was more people outside of the church who would do stuff, based off of assumption that could kind of hinder and hold back progress. Personally.
Man, that's a heck of an answer to that question. Same question, Dr. Duke.
Yeah, I think, man, the church, I don't have any resentment. I think, like Pastor Steve, man, I think the one thing that I always wanted, and very similar, I always wanted my church to know that I had a world and I had a life outside of them.
Okay. That's good.
And again, identity has been something that I've thrown up.
Mm-hmm.
So what has always been my thing is developing an identity outside of my church and even outside of my father. So I developed my own relationships. I started out, and I would say that a nice portion of my preaching engagements came because of who I was.
Mm-hmm.
But as life progressed, most now of the opportunities that I get have nothing to do with who my father is.
That's great.
Half of the people that I preach for don't even know my dad.
Really?
No, they're relationships from Howard, relationship from Morehouse, relationship from United, where I got an opportunity to do my D-Min, and just opportunities that the Lord has allowed us to do well on and in. And I tell people, and I agree with Steve, man, being a pastor's kid in ministry it has its blessings, but it has a lot of challenges.
Okay.
You have to be almost double as good, as I mean, a lot of the guys, if you look who are on the circuit today, they don't have, you mentioned guys like Charlie Dates. You don't know who Charlie, I mean, in ministry, who is his father? We know who his father in the ministry is. You mentioned several other cats out there. When you are us and you grow up, there's this kind of thing. No matter how good Steve, I think Steve, if you ask me, is probably the most polished preachers of our generation.
Wow.
But when he gets up, that target is on his back.
Yeah.
Because no matter how good he does, well, that's Steve Thurston's son.
Wow.
Or that's Kenneth Duke's son, or that's Ralph West's son. So
that's what I want. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's the transparency that I'm looking for right there. That's it. That's it. Because those subliminal pressures, you know what I'm saying, sometimes. And so that's why I can appreciate Dr. Thurston for not, and I'm talking about your father now. And I wanted to make sure this, and when I wrote those questions out, I put father in about 5 of those questions. But I prayed that I wouldn't use those questions, because I haven't really used them, if you've noticed tonight. I told you we were just going to kind of flow tonight. Because I want to talk about how you guys have developed into the men that you are. I mean, I look, Kelon, I look all the time at how you esteem your daughter. You know what I'm saying? You esteem the world out your daughter. She don't like your little bald head. I understand. I get it. You said that earlier today. But you make sure you include that. And that's a trickle-down effect. That's because I saw a good father. I take that back. It's either my father wasn't good to me and I'm going to prove him wrong, or I had a good father and I'm going to make sure I father him the same way. And for you to tell me that dad pulled over when you told him you were called to preach and cried. You know what I'm saying? When you tell me, Stephen, that you were talking to Jasmine, because I hear Pastor Sutton talk about that checker club all the time. And for him to come out of that checker club, call your dad. And look at it. He gave you a date to preach, but he called your daddy. Because he was not going to dishonor your daddy in that moment. He was going to make sure. I'm
gonna stop you, and I'm gonna help you kind of understand why I esteem my daughter the way I do. So, my dad is a great man. He was not perfect in this. If I would give my dad as a father a 95. The 5% I'm gonna take away from this, because one of the challenges that my father had growing up was he didn't do a lot of public celebration of us.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't know that. And the reason why he didn't, I think, is because we were his children. And so, like, there were kids in our congregation who played football. I just use that as an example. And he would get up, oh man, so-and-so, went to that game and he did X, Y, and Z, or she did this, but he wouldn't do it for us. I was actually one of the best athletes, I'm talking about my senior year in our area. And there was never anything really said. And I think a part of that was, well, these my children. I don't want to push and all that stuff. So we had to deal with that. And I said to myself, when I had a child, I wanted her to know, and I wanted everybody to know how proud I was of her.
Okay.
And my
Wow.
dad was proud. He told us he was proud of us, but it wasn't something that was done publicly. So
I
Yeah.
got you.
that's why I'm intentional about that.
That's
So
good. That's good. That's real good. I appreciate that testimony. And a 95 is still an 8 for everybody that's
yeah,
listening.
it's still A. It's
95,
still,
yeah,
hey,
95
he
is
was
a
still an
high
A.
A. Yeah.
That was probably the one flaw. And
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So we get ready to wind this down. It's 10 o'clock, and but give me. You got a choice, Thurston. Give me your
Okay.
greatest success or your greatest failure in ministry. Either one, not both. Just give me one.
Wow.
Kelon, I'm changing
I,
your question, so don't think you got time to think about it.
all right. I'll roll with greatest success.
Okay.
And I think that it is hard. It's hard to succeed. Legacy.
Wow.
And I think each one, from my great grandfather to my grandfather to my dad, everybody built up and kept taking things higher. And I think for the 9 years that I was at New Covenant, I was able to continue that aspect of the legacy. I've seen people, especially in the business space, you don't see too many Black-owned businesses that last generationally. You may go to the second generation, but it stops after that. And I've seen a lot of people snort it away, gamble it away, spend it away, and that hasn't been our testimony. So I think my greatest success is that my dad is able to get up and say, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased," which he often says publicly. If he's ever there to present me, if I'm preaching or whatever the case may be, he says it and he makes it known. And I think it's because I didn't mess up the name, the legacy, and what he has spent the past 50 years building on top of what my grandfather built, on top of what my great grandfather built.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. I lied, Kelon. Give me the same answer. Which one? Greatest success or greatest failure?
My greatest, I would say, failure. I mean, there's so many, man. I think not. My wife would probably agree with this. I have, especially in my adulthood, I have missed certain opportunities. I am such a loving and kind of background guy. I have allowed so many opportunities to go because I felt like somebody else was better.
Wow.
You know, I wanted to put somebody else out there. And so to me, that has been a failure. I've done that, oh man, I can't, now, and then, we didn't get into my story. And so I'll talk about this in my success. I've come a long way. I've defied the odds. I have a lot of challenges, educational challenges, and to see where God has brought me from, man, to overcome them with doubts. Sometimes I doubt myself. I'm my own worst critic, man. And to surpass, I don't think every season that I've been in, I've always doubted myself. But the success is, even though I doubted, I still stepped up to the plate.
Okay.
Through the help of God. And God has shown me. Lord, you said go. You said go to Chicago. I'm going. I don't know. I ain't a pastor before. I'm going. And the Lord showed himself mighty there. Wow. And that has been the testimony. Every time I stand, I have no real faith in myself. I wish I had more.
Wow.
But through God's grace, man, God has showed himself strong in my weakness. And I think that's my greatest success.
Man, I love it. That's a very, very, very well thought out answer, because so many people, like you said, want to mimic success. So many people want to duplicate it. You know what I'm saying? But both of you guys have been very adamant about creating your own name and developing your own identity. And I thank God for Pastor Stephen Thurston. I thank God for Stephen Thurston II, because he's on this show tonight and we're having this conversation. He's definitely blessing the people. But I thank God for Pastor Stephen Thurston for giving you the space to be, because he's like you say, you've been a preacher your whole life, that your whole life, right?
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, man, for giving you that space to grow, and for him to give you that, for Kelon to give you that those accolades saying that you're one of the most polished preachers. Because I mean, you're so gifted with even the post you put out, because I don't just read words. I look at the word, that mind behind the words. And I
Gotcha,
try to
man.
think about where the orientation comes from. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because the way you handle those Black Hebrew Israelites, I started to call you and say, man, please, can you give me a crash course? Because they down here blitzing gas stations and everything else. I just stick a middle finger. I'm joking, but I tell them I don't feel like I ain't got time to talk to you, your mama, nobody else. Y'all can leave me alone because I still know how to cuss. I ain't forgotten. I will
Yes,
cuss, man.
sir.
I'm good. And tune, look, and Kelon, and tune on the way out. So I
Right,
ain't tripping. I tune on the way out. So I appreciate that for Dr. Kenneth.
Hey, Steve Thurston, let me say this.
Okay, go ahead.
He is literally one of the sweetest guys. And I don't mean that jokingly. We joke a lot, but he's a very soft-hearted guy, man. Like this guy, I just got some texts from my wife. He's one of the most supportive. He comes off like he's real strong and and he'll cut you and cuss you out and all that stuff. But if he's your friend, he is your friend.
That's Chicago, man.
And that's something that folk need to know about him. Like,
that's
I don't know why, but for some reason we got a really good relationship, and that guy has been in my life, and I want the world to know who Steve really is. He's really soft. He ain't as hard as y'all think he is.
You gonna take that, Steve?
Don't have nobody get shot, dude. They gonna come trying me. And they forgot to scroll through my feed.
I done stopped him from
AR-15
shooting people, about to shoot people in Atlanta.
Okay,
so
okay.
I know exactly what he's talking about. But he's a great guy, man.
You got to be on ready in Chicago. But you know what? Chicago is one of the greatest preacher towns in the world. And if you grew up in Chicago and you come to Atlanta, if you don't have connections, you will have culture shock. Because Chicago is a lot like Little Rock. I'm from Little Rock, Duke. You were in my city a few weeks ago. I'm originally from North. Yeah, I'm from North Little Rock. My father minister is Bishop Kenneth L. Robinson. And so Little Rock is a lot like Chicago. It's a camaraderie among preachers. We're close. Yeah. Atlanta is a lot of cliques, and I call them gangs. That's why when I got here, man, I don't hardly rock with nobody, man, because I can't do it like that. I'm not, I'm a preacher, and it's a certain way I'm going to carry myself in public. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to care. Like me and you, we can talk about a certain way around each other, but I'm not going to talk like that in front of people that don't know us. Because everybody's not ready for that conversation. You know what I'm saying? But some of those old boys, they'll cuss in Golden Corral while baby right next to you and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, nigga, come on, bro. These people, they right there, But I appreciate your camaraderie, and I appreciate the fact that you guys grew up together. Like I said, I remember you all coming to Elizabeth, because I was at Elizabeth from 96 to 02.
Okay.
So during that time is when you all were coming around a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember that, and I watched you. And like I said, and Pastor Oliver would give you all high praise. He was like, you hear them boys? They young. Like he said, you hear them boys? They are young, and y'all just kept showing up, and I appreciate it. And man, and when I thought about having this conversation, YouTube popped in my spirit.
Thank you, man.
And I wanted to make sure that I got you on. It's so funny. I remember this is the last story, and I promise we're gone. But I remember my little girl, I started a little church back in the day, and I would preach, and I'd be up, and I'd bring up the home stories. And maybe some of you all can relate to some of these. How you use practical application, you bring up the home stories. And I look at my 5-year-old, and she's crying. And so when I asked the church, I said, why were you crying? You always telling my business. I'm like, girl, you ain't got no business. But she did have business. Yeah. And you all had business. You know what I'm saying? And some of the things that were done at home, you might not have wanted people to hear, in the church, so everybody can laugh at you and bring your story up and all that kind of stuff. But I thank God you all didn't have those horror stories for PKs. I might have to get some more PKs on that had some horror stories. That would mostly be the little girls, though, don't they? Because they be trying to say the little girls are fast. Do y'all say fast in Chicago?
We still use fast.
Oh, okay, that's I didn't know if that was an Arkansas word or not. Okay,
somebody from Arkansas brought it up here.
Okay, yeah, probably so. Yeah. That sounded about right. But no, man, hey, it's been a good conversation.
Thank you.
Honestly, I would like to get you all back at another time. If we do, we're gonna go a little deeper next time, though. We're not gonna do PK to EP. We're gonna do some good stuff, and
let's do it
and help some of these younger preachers, man. We got to do it, man.
Yeah, I got some stories I can tell about Kelon now to help a lot of young preachers to not make some of the same mistakes that he made.
Yeah, hey, y'all know y'all are OGs to some young preachers now, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
y'all are OGs to some young preachers, man. But that's the mistake that my generation, the one right before me, we made is we stopped talking to these young boys. I heard Jamal Bryant say something, and we're closing now, I promise. But he said something I thought was really powerful. But Jamal said that so many people are too busy making armor bearers and they're not making sons anymore. And I thought that was super, super powerful, that everybody wants an entourage and an armor bearer, but they don't want to take time to invest in a son. I remember when I went to Bishop Robinson, I told him I was called to preach. You know what he said to me? He said, okay, cool, and walked off. I said, hold on, Doc. I said, wait a minute. I said, I'm called to preach, Doc. Man, he said, okay, cool, and walked off. What you want me to do about that? And he did that for about 3 weeks straight. And I kept going to him. Then that third or fourth week, he said, I was going to see how persistent you were.
Yes, sir.
He said, because I thought if I could discourage you, then you were not called.
Yep.
And so that helped me. And so that's some of the tough love I received. So, but I appreciate, like I said, the foundation and the soil that your fathers gave you to be planted, not only be planted, but also to grow. And what I like about Kelon, especially with you and you too, Steve, he didn't grow y'all like roses. They didn't put y'all in a box. They let y'all grow in the direction that you naturally grew in. And the fruit is in the labor. You know, the succession is coming up. You pastored for 9 years, got 97% of the vote. That's unheard of. And now you're at Salem. That's amazing. And I eyes haven't seen, ears haven't heard, because you still, if y'all live the full 70 that we're promised, the 70, not to mention more, y'all still got a long way to go. So it's a lot of ministry left.
If he behaves, I'll give him a job.
You give him a job
for me.
Okay.
I'll make it my EP once I finish.
Will you check his resume? Are you gonna call his references?
I'm gonna check his resume. I need to see his grades, Doc.
You want to see his grades?
I want to see his grades. I want to see all the transcript.
Steve ain't bit more made a beat in a Man in the Moon. He probably made all A pluses and got the extra credit and all that kind of stuff. Look, the conversation people are starting to come in a little bit more now. But guess what, y'all? It's over. Y'all waited too late, so y'all gonna have to go back and watch the replay. But this is gonna be on Facebook, YouTube. I'll put it on Spotify, and I'll put it on Apple Podcasts because I want them to hear it. I'm sorry about my technical difficulties. I tried to do camera tonight, and I thought it was charging, but it wasn't charging while it was in the whatever. Hey, whatever. Y'all handled it like champs, so I appreciate that. But be looking for my call again soon. In the next couple of months, we're gonna do it again. Next week, I got a young lady that's coming on. It's gonna be a different kind of conversation. It ain't gonna be saved. FLOW stands for faith, leadership, organizations, and witnesses. So you're gonna fall in one of those categories. So next week I got a girl coming on telling her testimony, and she has like 240,000 followers on TikTok. So hopefully we'll have a good show next week. So I'm looking forward to that. But Steve, you got any closing words?
Hey, if you're a senior pastor and you've got a kid that's in ministry, take the time to pay attention to them, hear their voice, and respect them, not as just your child, but as your co-laborer in the Calvary, in the cargo of Calvary. That's important, so that you keep that relationship tight and you don't son your son, daughter your daughter. And you make sure that y'all grow together and you respect the gifts that God has given that child and the vision that God has given that child for that area of ministry.
Sounds good. What about you, Dr. Duke? Give us some closing words.
What Steve said.
Don't
flunky exposure, man. Don't flunky exposure. Pastor Maurice Watson, one of your Arkansas brothers, told us that when we were at Morehouse. I'll never forget it. He said, don't flunk your exposure. Whatever your exposures are, make certain you get exposed. Don't flunk it.
Don't flunk your exposure.
Don't flunk your exposure.
I love it. Dr. Stores is on. He said, what's good, guys? He said, you got one of my favorites on, Dr. S.J. Thurston. Dr. Stores, I need to talk to you because I need you on my Monday night show like really, really soon. I need some positive examples of marriage, and I need you. I'm putting you on blast in front of the world, so please call me tomorrow so we can schedule you for a Monday night. I need to get you and some Miss Shantae on. I need some positive examples. But as I always say, gentlemen, when we get out of here, I always say my favorite slogan. My slogan is, the world is changing. But my question for you is, why do you remain the same? Y'all have a good night, and we'll catch you on the rebound. Have a good night.